Okay, here we go. What's up, my juice lovers? Welcome to the very first ever episode of, hold on, ready? Goodnature Radio.
Nice.
This is your host, Charlie Wetlaufer, and with my esteemed co-host, Chef Ari Sexner.
Hello.
And Olivia Esquivel.
What's up, guys?
We'll get into official intros in a minute here. Before we get into that, I just kind of wanted to give the brief overview of what this show is and what our audience can expect, and then we'll do the intros and get right into the good stuff. So, Goodnature Radio is a new weekly show we'll be publishing every Friday, where it will be the 3 people here plus a rotating guest starting next week. And we will discuss any and all things juice industry related. And the goal here is for our audience to learn as much as possible and have a more successful juice business because of it. So I would say if you're thinking about starting a juice business, or you already have one and you're trying to grow or become profitable, or you're struggling with something, like, this is the show for you. This is who it's targeted at. And beyond business, we'll have people on that are experts in nutrition and health and everything sort of juice related. And so basically, I want this to be sort of, as I'm calling it, an old school talk radio type podcast show. That's like my description. So I set up a link where people can leave us voicemails. So if they're struggling with something in their business and they would like to get the opinion of the juicing experts on it, we have a link for you to leave us a voicemail. I'll play it on the air. You can do that at goodnature.com/radio. You can record a voice message using your phone, or if you have a mic on your computer, you can do that. And then also, if you are interested in consulting services from either Ari or Olivia, there's a form on that same page. So goodnature.com/radio. You can leave us a voice message or send us a consultation request. And Ari and Olivia will get on a free 30-minute call with you. Be happy to kind of pick your brain and see where you might need help, or maybe you don't need help and you just need to ask a quick question. They'll be happy to get on a call with you. All right, so let's get into intros. Chef Ari, I've known you for a very long time. We've been working together for a while. You are the author of the Juicing Companion, which is probably the most popular juicing book for people that want to create their own juice recipes. And you are also probably the most experienced juice business consultant in the world, where last time I checked, you had consulted for over 250 juice businesses since 2015 when you started working with Goodnature full time. So maybe you can give a quick sort of background into what you're doing before juice, how you transitioned into juice, and what you're up to now.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, my background is I basically grew up in the kitchens, like I was a real people person, didn't really like talking to people too much. So I just decided, what better way than just hanging out in the back of the kitchen. So I've worked my way up in restaurants for about 15 years, mostly based out of Vegas. Went to culinary school and at the Culinary Institute of America in New York. But when I came back, I really wanted to be a steakhouse chef. So I worked in steakhouses for about 10 years. I finally got the opportunity to become a sous chef, manager position. About 5-6 years, been working there, managing employees, until I was tasked with starting the first certified organic cold press juice operation when I was a chef at the Bellagio. I was in charge of the garde-manger department, where it was a support kitchen where we basically produced product for the entire hotel. We had about 40 employees, 3 different kitchens, and went through a lot of product. But I started that program. I met up with Charlie at Goodnature, started helping out their sales staff with people that would call in just because they recently moved to Vegas for a little bit. And we had a talk and decided to try out the consulting. It really took off that I was able to leave the restaurants and work for Goodnature full time and kind of help people with kind of what I've been through personally, you know, with helping with food costs, creating recipes, all that stuff.
Something I'd like to add, Ari gave me a tour of the back of house of Bellagio in Vegas when he was working there. It is unbelievable. It would blow your mind. Like if anyone ever gets a chance to tour the back of house kitchens at any of the big casino hotels, it's crazy. I mean, they're making food and beverages for literally thousands of people a day out of these kitchens. And Ari had 40 chefs working under him, making all the salads and sandwiches and dressings and juices. And it was just like really unbelievable. It's like a different scale than you've ever seen before. So if anyone gets a chance to ever see that, definitely recommend checking it out.
Yeah.
All right, Olivia.
Yes.
Olivia, you and I have become quite close lately. We met a few years ago. You're the founder of Southern Press Juicery,
Yep.
which is located in North and South Carolina. I think you're up to what, 3 locations now?
3 locations now, yes.
Yep, and very successful, does millions of dollars a year in revenue. You also started a line of adaptogen supplements. Is that the right way to describe it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wild Crafted Collection, which is a
Yep.
really great line. You spoke at JuiceCon a few years ago. You've been on my podcast, which I think was one of the best episodes that I've done. Just definitely one of the most educational. And since then, we've been communicating a lot, and we've recently decided to partner together. And you can bring some of your front of house and marketing expertise to our clients from a consulting role as well. So yeah, basically the same thing. Maybe you can give us your quick background, what you're doing before Juice, how you got into Juice, and what your sort of day-to-day looks like now.
Sure. Yeah. So before Southern Press Juicery, I worked at a really large regional hospital here in Greenville, South Carolina, doing public relations and community relations, always built around basically community health and wellness. So really my career, even though all of the projects that I've been involved with have been wildly different, they've all really circled around public health and community health and marketing. So after I left that role as sort of the face of the hospital, for the Hispanic and the African American communities, I started my own public relations firm, and I focused mainly on helping companies build brands, helping them enter new markets, and really helping people build their own brand within their company. So building, kind of a self-brand and a self-image before there were influencers. And apparently now that's, everybody does that now. But I also traveled. A lot of my clients were athletes, para-athletes. And so, I really got sort of hooked on to their life, their raw vegan life that a lot of professional athletes follow, of course. And that's how I got into the juicing world just personally. I was living in Miami and ended up coming back to Greenville, South Carolina, where I went to school at Furman University and was juicing by myself in the kitchen. There was like no juice bars here. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot keep driving 30 minutes to Whole Foods back then to buy like, a 50-pound bag of carrots. And like the options were just so limited. So I ended up sort of really thinking, okay, there's a hole in the market here. And sat down with a local really well-known restaurateur and pitched him my idea. Of course, I had been, visiting juice bars all over the country in Miami and New York and Colorado as I was traveling with these athletes. And so I had the idea really of what really good juice bars look like. And I said, look, I don't have any food and beverage experience, but I'm a marketing professional and I live this lifestyle and I'd like to help you launch this brand. And so 6 months later, we opened Southern Press Juicery. And it's been a really fun ride ever since then. I'm an actual client of Goodnature's. I own X1s, or Southern Press Juicery does. And that's how I got to know Charlie and the whole gang. And, it's one of those things where I'm in it because it's a lifestyle that I really enjoy. And, I'm raising my children that way. But also I really enjoy creating the brand aspect of it. I have my own chef, much like Chef Ari. And so he gets to do all the chef things and I get to have fun with the brand and grow it in different ways, like Wild Crafted Collection, like our own protein that we just launched. So I kind of have fun with the brand of it and also with managing the front of the house and making sure at the end of the day that we're doing in-store promotions that are helpful, that were affecting the bottom line, driving revenue to the top. And just the few interactions I've had with Goodnature so far have always been really fun. At JuiceCon, people lining up to ask, and really hold Southern Pressed Juicery up to a pedestal is always a little bit surprising to me, because when it's your own, you don't think you're that great. But so hopefully, if I have any advice I can give on how to build a brand and how to make front of the house run more efficiently, that's what I'm here for.
Cool. So before we move on, just before I forget, we are running a Juicing Companion Edition 2 giveaway through Goodnature right now. So it's the second edition of Ari's book. I think we've added 100 pages beyond the first edition. We added new recipes and a new smoothie section and a bunch of new ingredients, right, Ari?
Yeah, it's a lot of work went into it. Really expanded on the original edition, but it's got tons of new stuff. Tons of new recipes too.
As we say, it's not a recipe book, it's an idea book. So there are recipes in it, but it's really meant to help you formulate your own recipes. So if you want to get in on the giveaway, go to Goodnature's Instagram account. That's at Goodnature Pro, Pro. And I think you just have to share the post to your stories and tag 3 friends that like juice. And that giveaway is going until Sunday of this week, I believe. Okay, getting into it. So we do have one voice message to play from our friend Caitlin Slifer. I sent her a message. I'm like, hey, it'd be really cool if we had a voice message to play in the very first. And she's traveling in Hawaii, and she took the time to do it, I think like super late last night or something. So thank you, Caitlin. We'll go ahead and play that, and then we'll get into the discussions here.
Hey guys, this is Caitlin from Juice Co. in the Bay Area, California. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experience on staffing and inflation. 2022 has been our hardest year yet with finding reliable staff that have quality work experience in the food and beverage industry. We're also trying to navigate the major inflation and product shortages we've all seen this year. Freight is high, and we're constantly having to source alternate products because of the shortages and cost increases. Any thoughts or advice you guys have would be awesome. Looking forward to tuning in.
Awesome. So there's a few parts to this. So there's inflation, freight costs, staffing shortages, and labor costs. So does anyone have any thoughts immediately after hearing this that we should jump into?
Yeah. Olivia, how do you hire people? I think
I was gonna say, Chef Ari, how about you take the food cost one?
That's I mean, the hiring, just to jump in on that, I mean, it's all over. It's extremely tough. I mean, some of it's got a bunch of different factors, as long as you're paying what your market should be paying, that's not always the answer. I've talked to a lot of my chef friends in Vegas that are paying top dollar a lot of times. And I talked to them a couple days ago, and one entry level position, I think they start pay at $23 an hour, which is pretty impressive to start out. I think they've been trying to hire that for 6 months. They recently had 10 applications. 5 actually responded. He called them to show up, and basically no one even showed up out of the 10 people. So I really have no good solid answer for the hiring that I could think of.
I know right now in the neighborhood I live in Austin, they've reduced the school bus pickups to like every other week because they don't have enough bus drivers. So they have to do one neighborhood one week, then a different neighborhood the next. So it's definitely hospitality. I think any of the service jobs are really feeling it.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you for us, we definitely have had to shift some things around and put people in positions that normally aren't in those positions. So, instead of having what they call a clipboard manager, our managers are now working part of the staff and really always have been. But we keep our front of the house. I usually don't have more than 3 at a time. So, and that would include a working manager, whether that's yourself as an owner, entrepreneur, or your general manager or an assistant manager. But if you're working as I have to remember we're talking to juice bar owners likely here, then you're one of the 3. It's not you plus 3. and that's in a very busy time. On a very slow time, like in the morning, we have one person open, we have a second person come in at 8, and then a third come in for lunch, and then we close with 2. One of those usually being either the owner or the manager. So we try to keep it very low. We do merit increases based on quarterly evaluations. And those aren't always mandatory. It's, a merit-based increase. But I will tell you that we are, I have 3 locations. And so we're kind of dancing around with different ideas. And my Charlotte location at Park Road Shopping Center, we don't really have a front of the house and the back of the house. We share, it's all one house, really. And so they have shared tips. And so, our associates make, if they're a shift leader, they make $10.50 an hour. If they're just coming in, obviously, if they've been with me a long time, then they get merit increases. But they end up splitting the tips because they're working both back of the house and front of the house for us to keep back of the house labor down. So they're juicing in the back, and then they're coming forward and making smoothies as well. And the shared tip pool team seems to be really, really impressive. Sometimes my staff makes anywhere from $10 to $18 an average just in tips. So if you're not asking for tips and you're not sharing that amongst the staff, I would definitely encourage you to start doing that. When we don't have a shared tip pool, back of the house ends up having a higher hourly rate than the front of the house because they don't have the tips.
So for collecting tips, you just do it on your POS system?
Yeah, we do it on our POS system as well as on our app. Every time we answer the phone, if it's a curbside or if it's, a phone order, I always say, would you like to leave a tip for curbside service today? I don't just say, hey, you want a tip on that? I really sort of bait them in terms of like, hey, we're running out in the rain. We're running out in the curb. Would you like to leave your staff a tip for that? And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, leave $1, leave 20%, and if you get enough of those and it really helps. And so my front of the house girls really like when they work either with me or with a manager because we don't take tips. And so that's a good way to strategize it as well, is to keep your front of the house really skinny, or whoever's on the tip pool with the manager and owner, only give them tips, and then they'll like it. I mean, it'll also force them to work faster because I'll tell them, look, I'm not going to have you be the only one on with me if you can't handle the orders. So if you want all the tips, it's got to be a really strong person. And of course I jump over and help them as well. But shared tips is the way to go. It's a good way to increase their pay without the company taking a hit.
I think with incentives are definitely a good opportunity to actually try to get some employees. That's a good point. I think also possibly I've always had great success with, looking to your employees for friends and family that could actually work. That's because when you bring them on, they kind of work a little bit harder in most cases, because they don't want to let their person that referred them down. Maybe you could do a referral fee if they find you an employee that worked a certain amount. I guess social media as well to try to find some employees.
Yeah. So we use all of those. We use social media. We use Hire Me. I've seen better results with Hire Me, which is like a job posting site that we pay for. I've seen better results when we change the subject or the title to large shared tip pool. And that seems to get more attention. I've heard from some HR professionals that people really, it's the associates game right now. They, like you said, Chef Ari, like they can really pick and choose where they want to work and for what amount. So definitely put something in the title of your job search or your job application, your job posting that says either what the hourly rate is or what the incentives are, because at the end of the day, that's what everybody's looking for right now. And friends and family have always been the best for me. We've done incentives, and I've offered mega bucks if you bring a friend on, or you've helped us find somebody that stays for 6 months and doesn't have any demerits or write-ups or whatever, and get X amount. And I've never actually had anybody cash in on that. So it's not something that we use all the time, but referrals end up being the best ones for us.
Yeah, we at Goodnature, we try to hire through network before we go to like the open market. Usually works out a lot better in the long run, I think. Question about the tips on the POS system.
Mm-hmm.
I know most of them now, they give you an option like what tip percentages to show the customer, right? Like,
yeah, this is so interesting you asked this, Charlie, because I actually just got a new system yesterday. I had it in Charlotte and I had it in my newest locations and the second one in Greenville. But my original large location where I was going live from yesterday, it was not a forward facing screen. And I was really worried when we moved that in Charlotte because I thought the tips would go down when the customer had the opportunity to pick the tip and nobody was watching. It's a lot. For me, I collect the most tips because they're almost embarrassed to tell me no tip, right? And so I was really worried that our hourly tip average would go down, but it's actually gone up. I really do recommend keeping it on the percentage because most people just hit 20%, or 18%, and that ends up usually being more of a tip than if they just add $1 or $2. When I give them the receipt, they ended up just adding $1. But when they are prompted to just hit 20 or 18, it ends up being more than $1. So it's actually raising our tip payout.
Yeah, it's interesting. And what are you starting the suggested tips at for percentage wise?
I think
what percentage?
I think it prompts. I'll have to look, but I think it prompts for like 10, 18, and 20. It's just like an automatic prompt. And I find that most people are hitting 18 or 20. Mostly because it's not a high check average. So
yeah, and it's also to go, right? Mostly, it's not like you guys don't do table service.
We don't do table service, and this is always what shocks me. People will tip, not everybody, but people will walk in, open the case, grab their juice, pay, and tip like $5 on a $10 juice. It's insane, and I think it's just because of the community that we build. But it ends up being, that's why I always push my staff to really engage with our guests because that's how they end up, making their relationships and having them pay off is really in the tips. So my front of the house ends up making anywhere from $18 to $25 an hour once their tip is rolled in.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
great.
It's mega bucks. Yeah.
All right, do you have something to add?
Have you seen that change since since the pandemic, basically? Because I know when I get a to-go order and I go to the restaurant and pick it up, it's like $1, $2, but I noticed recently, myself too, just because delivery or sit down, a lot of times you just place the order and pick it up. You usually go with a 15 or 20%. Have you seen that change since?
No, I actually, our tips went up during COVID. And I think that a lot of it was probably just circumstance. We were one of the only restaurants open downtown. And when I tell you we were busy, we were insane. Like people would wait and wait and wait because we just couldn't pump orders out fast enough. So, a lot of it was just conversation. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry for the wait. We appreciate you coming in. And people were so concerned, especially during the height at the beginning of the pandemic, since all these other places were closing, they were really concerned that we were going to close. And so they would say, whatever we can do, we just want you to stay open. We need to stay healthy. And we were running a lot of in-store promos too. And so I think they were just really thankful and didn't want us to close. And so we saw the tips actually much higher than we would normally see, I think, just as a point of gratitude.
I know I personally have increased the amount I tip, especially on to-go orders and stuff. I used to just not tip. Well, or like you said, maybe tip $1 on an order or something, or give a small tip, like give my change in the jar or something. But now, I guess as a business owner myself, I'm more aware of the challenges that businesses are facing right now. So I'm definitely tipping more frequently and a higher percentage. Just because I don't know, I want the company to have people there when I go. When I walk into the juice bar, I want them to have somebody to take my order.
Yeah, exactly.
I just know how hard it is right now.
Yeah.
So if an employee were to come to you and say, I'm thinking about leaving because this other cafe is offering me $2 more per hour, do you shake their hand and say, good luck, it was great having you? Or do you try to match the pay and try to keep them around? Or how do you handle that?
Well, I'll just go ahead and say, for me, it really depends. During the middle of the pandemic, we didn't have any staffing problems. When the whole world had no staff, we didn't have any staffing problems because, like I said, we were one of the only restaurants open. And so we took other people's staff temporarily. We were told all the restaurants, hey, we'll give them back when you guys reopen, but let us help you keep them employed. So we had so much staff that we were struggling to find things for them to do. So when everybody else couldn't find staff, we didn't have that issue. I've actually only had 2 problems with staffing. One has been past month, and the other one was just as people were starting to come back to work. But for me, it really depends. That question happens to me a lot. And it depends really on whether it's a front of the house or back of the house person. If it's a front of the house person, that for me as a shift leader is somebody that is like invaluable to the team. If my team is really skinny, like after summer, all my front of the house staff goes away to college. And so I'm left always for 2 weeks, like plugging holes, because the majority of my staff is left, but the sales are still high. And so who's left of us just doesn't match up. So it really depends on one, how valuable that person is to the team, how staffed up I am or how staffed up I'm not. So essentially, how much do I need them? And two, if I did just give 2 associates an out of order merit increase, meaning it was not time for their evaluation, which is normally when I give a merit increase. I gave them more responsibilities. And so along with the responsibilities, I said, you've got to open up your weekend schedule for me. You've got to be more flexible for me. I don't want you to leave, but I will give you, the X amount that you're asking for, but I'm going to expect this in return. So it's a conversation. I don't just like throw money at them and let them, take and run.
It almost creates a kind of bad culture. Yeah. If people just come to you and demand raises and you say, okay, right.
I mean, you do that and other employees at that same level
exactly
find out, then it's a big issue. I think your employees, you're always trying to have them grow and eventually, hopefully with the company or hopefully someplace else. But if they're money driven and not 100% passionate about it, it's kind of challenging. I think you kind of decide right there, just don't raise their pay. Just, is there room for growth for like a different level position, a manager position, or maybe it's not a good fit, because it can become real tricky if you're paying people all different types of hourly rates. I think you definitely reward them for their loyalty if they're hitting certain milestones, like 5 years, 6 years, or however yearly raises, but
or the Olivia, you said you do quarterly reviews. We do annual reviews at Goodnature. It's like you just set the expectation. Like, look, guys, when we do these reviews, that's when we evaluate your position and the market, and if your responsibilities have changed, and like that's when we either give a raise or we don't. But there's no sort of in between. Like, hey, I want more money. Unless the role changes. Exactly.
So if it's going to be an out of sequence, the role's got to change. One thing that that we noticed in our larger location recently is that we were so short staffed in the front of the house. Now I said back of the house gets paid a larger hourly rate because they're not in the shared tip pool, because the shared tip pool is for people that are doing their made to order items in the front. And handling more of the customer service. So our back of the house was having to come forward to support the front of the house because we were so short staffed. So one thing we started to make the transition is that we started including back of the house and the front of the house tip pool for however long they were a part of it. Because they were like, oh, here we are helping these girls that are making $20 an hour, and we're still at 15. And so they were taking on some of the load. So what we've started doing is accounting for the time when they have to come forward to help us and making them a part of the tip pool for that duration of time.
That's interesting. That's a creative way to do it. Okay, let's move on. So let's move into sort of in. Sorry,
she did talk about inventory.
Yep.
And costing. I mean, I was kind of waiting for that.
I thought that was more of a back of the house question.
Yeah.
That was the next thing here. So let's talk about inflation and inventory and supply chain costs. Go ahead, Ari.
Yeah, I mean, I like this stuff. I don't know why, but especially if it's not there's a lot of different routes you can go. I think the main thing is developing relationships with your purveyors. Don't settle on just one purveyor for all your products. Have multiple purveyors. Always plan for the worst. There's going to be shorts all the time. You want to be able to have purveyors so you can be able to compare pricing on that. That's extremely important. A lot of times, if you have relationships with them, they'll be able to have certain products that they need to move that you can run a special for and get it at a discounted rate. Your menu is extremely important at reducing your costs of produce, especially through seasonal products. You know, when products in season, it's usually extremely affordable and at its highest quality. So if you're not taking advantage of seasonal specials, juices, salads, and incorporating them as much as you can, that's a important aspect for sure for being able to reduce that cost. Other than that, I think packaging is really important, especially in terms of size of bottles with juices. Now, all this, it doesn't translate to every single juice bar. You know, a lot of it depends on your market, how you're selling your product. But what I've noticed is maybe 5-6 years ago, everyone sold their bottles of juice in 16-ounce bottles. Mm-hmm. You know, and that was kind of their staple. They didn't have any other sizing that I really remember. And then recently, people started switching more and more to 12 or 14-ounce bottles. And I think if you look at the numbers of the produce you're going in, the cost of the produce going in, losing 2 to 4 ounces of juice, you can hit a much more aggressive price point that is kind of easier to take as a customer. You know, you're not sacrificing quality. And it also leads to people buying multiple juices a lot of times rather than just one bottle. So definitely look at your packaging sizes, not to try to trick the consumer, but be able to have a more relatable price.
Yeah. One thing a lot of people don't realize is that the standard in the industry, if you buy a 16-ounce bottle, there's actually 17 ounces of space in there. There's like 16.9 because most companies, like those old school milk style bottles everyone likes to sell juice in, there's an extra ounce of space at the top because when they used to sell milk in those, they left space at the top. So you buy 16 ounces of milk and there's like an inch of empty space. They fill it all the way to the top. You're actually selling people 17 ounces of juice and pricing it for 16 ounces. So, I mean, even for the smaller bottles, you buy a 14-ounce bottle that might actually be more like 15 or something. So you should understand like the difference between like the fill line and the actual capacity. So you might even be only giving people an ounce less.
That's also a big debate, you know, whether you top off the juice or you leave that little bit of headspace. You know, I get questions on that all the time. And I don't know. My opinion is that little bit of headspace, it doesn't affect the juice. But I mean, I definitely have passionate arguments with people all the time that filling it up to the top, topping up all the juice actually helps with the oxidization or keeping that oxygen in there. But in my opinion, I don't think it has an effect on the juice. I think there's going to be air in there no matter what.
So your suggestion would be leave a little space at the top? Yeah,
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get that
as a consumer, like I don't care if there's space at the top.
Yeah. So when we fill our bottles, I wish I hadn't drank all this bottle, but when we fill our bottles, we fill to the very top and then we squeeze to kind of push some of that air out and then put the cap on. So when you're looking at it, it looks full to the top, but when you release it, it goes down a little, you know. But I had a couple of notes that I was making of things that we've been doing for inflation and freight costs. One is one of the things I talked about on the live yesterday. I find a lot of the smaller businesses are buying convenience products instead of making things in-house. I can't tell you how many juice bars I've talked to that are making an almond milk on their Goodnature machine and then using store-bought or purveyor sourced almond milk for the front of the house for their smoothies and bowls. That's like crazy. You should be using what you're making in the back. It's so much cheaper to buy almonds and have filtered water coming through your sink than to buy, cartons of almond milk. I mean, it's just like
and some of that stuff is just such crap too.
Oh, it's like horrible.
On one side, you're selling the customers this amazing, pure,
Yeah.
cold pressed almond milk, and then you're just dumping this like processed crap into the.
Yeah, same thing with oat milk, and same thing with apple juice. So we juice everything, everything that, unless it's a coconut water or a coconut milk that we use in the front of the house for smoothies and bowls, gets pressed on our X1. Everything from our lemon to our ginger, anything that's squirted into a made to order item is made in the back of the house. So I would say I understand in the beginning when you're like trying to figure it out and you're like, gosh, I don't have that many orders. It's just easier for me to buy store-bought almond milk. But those things end up adding up, and it's also affecting the quality of your product. So get with Chef Ari and figure out how to make things at a smaller batch in your own facility. The guests will appreciate that more, and it'll give you a better price point on your food cost. And then number 2, I would say have purveyors battle for your business. I am frequently sending our purveyors. We use one in particular that's our biggest one, and we try to source everything from them. And I'll tell you that's because we do enough business to get a kickback. So when you get large enough, you can work that into your deal. But so that's why I'm always pushing for this one provider, this one purveyor. But one thing that I'll often do if I'm sourcing something from a different purveyor is I will send them. So if I'm sourcing something from purveyor number, B, I will send my main purveyor A the list of what I'm buying, the quantity, the weight, and what I'm paying. And I'll say, if you want me to order this from you, you got to beat it. And they often will. A lot of times they'll say like, oh, I have to buy X amount. And I'll say, well, you have to store it. Like I'll source my acai from you, but you have to cold store it and then just deliver it to me on my order. So really, I think a lot of people, because you're so used to being a consumer, like in the grocery store where you just go and you grab what you want and there's no negotiation when you're paying for things, unless you're like, in Asia and you're like, at a farmer's market or something like that. But you really have the bargaining power as the customer when you're buying food related products. So try to find some purveyors. And then another thing you could do is you can go in with other small businesses. A lot of times they'll have like a maximum or minimum cost of like, okay, you need $500 for delivery on Thursday. You may not have $500 worth of things that you need, but maybe you can get together with the sushi bar next door or with the bakery and say, hey, let's put all of our order together, have it all shipped to my place. That way we can all make the minimum order and get a Thursday or Friday delivery. And then I would say you just can't be afraid to remove things off your menu. Like Chef Ari said, if something is costing too much, like my guests are all pissed right now because they want all the rest of their summer features, but watermelon cost is shooting up. Strawberries are shooting up. We're getting smaller and smaller watermelons, not getting the yield that we were getting in the height of the summer. So it's off. It's gone. Bye-bye. So, you just can't be afraid to take things off the menu or to reflect menu pricing when you have to. I always say that's worst case scenario. A lot of times I see people on the Goodnature Facebook page just like jumping to ask people what they're charging for other ingredients. And I'm like, bro, you can't just ask me what I'm charging. I don't know what you're paying. It's not just across the board, just raise your prices. We just did our first price increase at Southern Press Juicery first time in 7 years, like
what?
two weeks ago. Yeah. So for us, whenever price of something goes up, we try to find something else on the menu that the price can go down. So it's not that we've never had a price increase. This is our first flat, the whole menu is going up.
I gotcha.
Versus like, okay, I'm going to shoot this one up and this one go down. That's why when somebody asked me how much the bowl was, I was like, oh crap, I don't know. Cause I just changed the price. But those are, for me, those are the main 3 or 4 main points. There is, you've got bargaining power, try to join with other small businesses. If you're in a ghost kitchen or something like that, a commissary kitchen, try to jump on each other's orders, to try to meet those minimum orders and get a better price point.
Yeah. That's why the menu is so important.
I think it's worth noting, like when you're talking business to business sales, if they earn your business on whatever product it is you're buying from them every week, that's a big line of revenue for them, like over the course of a year or 2 years or 3 years. So yeah, you definitely have bargaining power, I think, if you're buying enough.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes you have to, really dig in. Like I'll say that we just made a change on our almonds. We were buying from a purveyor, kind of third party. And we were like, dude, this is our biggest ticket item. It's killing us. Well, you guys were like super impressed by how much almond milk we were going through. So it's obviously one of our biggest orders on our ordering list. Well, we just saved $45,000 a year by going straight to a farmer. It's still coming through our third party provider, but again, we do a crap ton of purchasing of almonds, but literally $48,000 saved on our bottom line a year by just pushing that purveyor and saying, this isn't working for us anymore. Either you find me a cheaper price or I'll find somebody else who will. And they went out and found, they did the homework and they went and found a local Georgia almond grower. And here we are $48,000 later.
And the purveyors will really work with you. If you think you're too small of an operation, a lot of times, if they're smart, at least they'll set up an account with you. You could do what they call a will call, place an order. They'll pull everything. You'll have to actually pick it up if you don't hit a certain delivery amount. But they should definitely understand that you're a growing business and they could grow with you as well. So if they're not going to help you out, you should find somewhere else.
So let's, one more topic related to food cost, and then we'll move on. So someone named Randy left a message on the Facebook group about a week ago. Says, what's everyone's organic produce cost looking like? My produce cost for organic juices is between 30 and 35%. It's a combination of produce from Sysco and Whole Foods. Depending on the item, Whole Foods is cheaper than Sysco and vice versa. I'm having a difficult time staying at the 25% mark without raising my prices. Currently selling organic juices at $8.50 in plastic bottles and Captiva containers. Watermelon has been a huge help this summer by keeping my produce costs below 25%. So we'll start with Ari. Like, what do you recommend as far as food cost percentage, and what advice might you have for Randy here?
Well, first of all, you got to know what you're actually paying for that bottle of juice. You need to figure out how much raw produce in weight is going in to make one portion of juice. And that's definitely the biggest aspect. I see a lot of times when people say, I have 15 ounces of raw weight of carrots in this bottle of juice, when that's already cut, trimmed, peeled, everything. You're paying full price on the peel, those end nubs. So definitely figuring out that is number one. And
so they're calculating like after it's been prepped already weight.
Yeah,
based on the raw price when it's not
ignoring the trim. Another mistake is the food cost doesn't involve the bottle. I see a lot of times people factor in their cost of their Captiva bottle into the food cost. Keep it separate, just so that when you make adjustments on the actual produce going in there, you're changing the produce.
I cannot tell you how annoying it is. So I have this old blog article on the Goodnature blog that's how to calculate food cost. And the very first sentence, or like in the first paragraph, I say, this does not include packaging or labor or anything else. This is just food costs. And there's like 15 comments of saying, you forgot to include the price of the bottles. I'm like, guys, it's called food cost.
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into it, but the biggest challenge, I think, is actually how to determine that, how much produce is going in there. If you want, you could, I'll try to put out some more information on that, but that's definitely extremely important, is figuring out how much produce is going in that bottle of juice.
Yeah, I'll tell you where that hit me really hard was when we started BOGO, and we were, sometimes we'll transition between peeling our bananas and freezing them for our smoothies and bowls and buying them already pre-frozen, because in the summer, our volume is so insane that we can't peel the bananas fast enough. We don't have enough freezer space. Sometimes they come in green. So we'll always have a backup of pre-frozen bananas, which is not our, optimal situation. But in order to keep up with demand, sometimes we kind of go back and forth. Obviously increases our food cost, but we're able, we have a higher revenue coming in, so we can handle it a little bit better.
So when you say BOGO, you mean you're buy one get one?
Oh yeah, buy one get one.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to talk the SPJ talk, the SPJ COVID language. But one thing that even after years of doing this, that we never even realized was we were calculating our food cost of bananas with the peel. Man, by the time we started doing it and taking the peel off and realizing how much we're really getting of a weight of banana, let me tell you,
that's exactly what Ari's talking about.
It was the saddest day I've ever seen in the back of the house. Your food cost looks really good when you're peeling bananas until you realize how much you just paid for that peel you just threw in the garbage, and you're like, oh my god.
But that's when you have to come up with some new like marketing campaign saying,
yeah, exactly.
The peel is the most nutritious part, and then you start like a banana peel acai bowl.
Yeah, dehydrate the banana. But I mean, I don't know that this person told us how much yield they're getting. I heard $8 on an organic juice. All organic.
He's charging $8.50 for organic.
It didn't say how much, right?
The size, yeah.
So the size would be obviously interesting to note, but I mean, this is totally
like $8.50 is way too cheap for 16 ounce, in my opinion.
Okay, first of all, way too cheap, and second of all, I don't think this, Randy. I think you need to get with Chef Ari to learn how to calculate food costs, or you need to come and stage at Southern Press Juicery and teach me how to get a food cost of all organic under 25% at $8.50, assuming you're doing a 12 or 16 ounce bottle. Because if you are, send me how to do it. My fear is that you're not.
Yeah, it's tough. A lot has to do with your market, your demographic, because you could figure out your food cost. But that's not going to be what you're going to be selling the juice for, too. You know, you want to factor in tons of different stuff. Like when I do programs for grocery stores or markets, they're not a juice bar. You know, people are not going there for juice. They're going to the shop. So to be able to get that market that's not 100% familiar with juice, we got to hit certain price points. So we would have to sell a 12, 16 ounce non-organic in most cases, but they'd have to sell it for $4 or $5, you know, and their recipes would be 3 ingredients, and it's the highest yielding produce you have, you know, to be able to hit those marks. So the menu is extremely important based on your demographic too.
Yeah, I know if you go into Erewhon Market in LA, for anyone that doesn't know, it's like a super trendy, high-end market. It started in Venice Beach, like lots of celebrity sightings there. They use X1s to make their juice. They sell a ton of juice, and they charge up to $16 for a juice. I think for an almond milk is like $16. Everything's organic. It's in glass bottles. But I do think it's like $1.50 bottle deposit. So when you bring back a bunch of bottles, you get a ton of credit for new juice. And their juice probably started at 10 or 12 and go up to 16, but it's like, that's a very specific market. Those prices would not work in most neighborhoods.
I was just about to say, Ari, please.
Yeah.
Ari and Charlie, please put a disclaimer on that we are not suggesting $16 juice bottles.
Is that like a
America.
$5 bottle deposit on that?
$1.50, yeah. But they do thousands of dollars of juice sales in a busy summer day at one grocery store. And that's just the juice, not including all the other stuff. But yeah, that's a very unique market. So, but again, you just need to take into consideration like who your market is. Because like Ari said, if someone wanders into whatever your major grocery store chain is in your area, and it's like, oh, cold pressed juice, they're probably only going to pay $4 or $5. But if they're going to a juice bar to seek out cold pressed juice, they'll pay more, which I think gives some more room there.
Chef Ari, sorry, I was just going to ask, does Chef Ari have an actual, like, what do you recommend that most juice bars stay under? I know that it depends per area, but what's an optimal food cost if you're calculating food costs correctly?
For juice, I think, in my opinion, you got to get between 20 and 30%, is the goal. It's not always obtainable, but that's what you need to be working for, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah. So if he's sitting at 25, he's doing pretty dang good.
Yeah. I mean, and with running an organic operation, it's extremely challenging, because if you're certified organic versus regular claiming to be organic, there's a big difference. So if you're certified organic, you need to find certain farms. It can't just be labeled as organic. And the shortages are crazy on that, so you could only get green apples from 4 or 5 farms that you got approved on your plan. So you got to be extremely seasonal with organic to actually be in that 20 to 30% range for sure.
And then what target overall margin do we look for after you factor in packaging?
What do you have, Olivia, on that portion? Because the labor is a huge.
Well, also that's a big
too.
question too. Do you include labor in your margin calculation, or do you just include that as like a separate line item?
Well, usually when my chef sends it to me, he sends me his raw food costs, right? So his food cost, and then when we're pricing things out, he'll also send me food costs with packaging so that I know, and we can account for that. But I can totally look to see what just his total raw food cost is, and it depends on the package. It depends on if it's a smoothie item, if it's a logoed item, if it's a bottle. I don't have off the top of my head what percentage it is, because that just really changes based on whether it's a juice or a bowl or a smoothie or a food item that's going in a sandwich container. But we definitely look at them totally separate. So when I look at his recipe, when he's, when we're trying to cost something out for retail, or we're trying right now new fall smoothies because we're a little behind the game, he'll have it in a formula that Chef Ari can help you do, where basically I'll say, okay, maple syrup is really expensive right now. Let's pull back maple syrup from 1 tablespoon to half a tablespoon, or whatever. And then as he makes the calculations, it'll show me his raw food cost by itself. And then it's helpful to see what his food cost is with his packaging.
Yeah, you want your recipes in a spreadsheet if possible. Because the price of produce and everything changes every day. So you want to have as real-time data as you can.
How long or how often do you look at that data, Olivia?
He obviously, because he does the ordering, Chef Hank will tell me if something is really jumped up. Like his purveyors, he has a relationship where they will basically say, "Hey, chef, just so you know, celery is going up, or agave is going up, or whatever." And so sometimes we anticipate that. Like I said, we're not big changers of price at Southern Press Juicery. We can accommodate for it in the recipe, but I'm not one to just slap the price over to the consumer, because it just changes so much. So it's not something that we look at every day in terms of, hey, this is the juice that I make. How did the price change today? So we mainly look at it when we're changing recipes, we're about to flip the menu, or if he gets notified or noticed and is ordering, the price of something just went up. If it goes up a few dollars, a case or whatever, we kind of anticipate that. It's just like the market, right? It goes, you can't react every single time it changes. But when it's a drastic change, usually we tend to know beforehand. Sometimes we don't know until the truck shows up and what you ordered isn't on the truck. That's more of a pain in the butt than sometimes, changing food cost, just a supply issue.
I would think for a business to survive, like end price to customer minus all of your costs that went into that bottle of juice, you got to be making at least 50% would be my sort of estimate. And that would include like the labor to make it and packaging and everything. Because after you factor in the overhead and utilities and health insurance costs and like all those other unexpected costs, I think if you're not making at least 50%, you're probably going to struggle to make money consistently every month.
Yeah, that's challenging to get, it takes a lot of work and constant work for sure.
Would you agree that 50% seems good, or would you even be okay with like 40%? Or
yeah, I think it seems a little bit high, because there are so many factors, especially lately, utilities, labor,
labels.
Yeah. I mean, everything's going up for no reason too. Like there's certain things that should not be affected by inflation, but
all right, I just thought of a way to save every juice bar a bunch of money. Instead of selling juice bottles, people come in and hand you $10 and you just pour juice in their mouth from like a container. And you measure it out. You count 16 ounces and you
1, 2, 3.
Okay. Another question we had on the Facebook group this week. Adding spices to juices, so like powdered supplements and spices and stuff. We get questions, do you add it before you juice? Do you make all the juice and add it after the juice? Or do you add it to each bottle individually? Ari, what's kind of your go-to advice on this?
Well, like I always say, if it doesn't affect the color, the flavor, of the juice, no. So with adaptogens, there's a lot of different kinds. There's the extracts, which are liquid, and then the powders. So for the juices, you want to avoid adding powders to that and stick with the extracts. For plant-based milks, you could go with the powders rather than extracts. But with spices in general, do you want the little particles in there? Sometimes you do. Some are water soluble, some aren't. So, for instance, like cinnamon or cayenne, sometimes if they have a cider or like a starter juice with that little bit of cayenne in there, people want to see that, so it's definitely your choice. You could either add it after, if you want to see that in there. For cinnamon, for example, you could add it directly to the bag and grind the produce on top. You're going to need a little bit more than you normally would, but you can get that flavor without those specks floating around.
What about like I feel like I see people add cayenne or black pepper directly to the juice after it's made. That seems pretty common.
Yeah, those are like the exception for sure. I like adding that to the bottle, pouring the juice on top, just so that people could see that in there. Mm-hmm. Especially if you have juices that look pretty similar. You see that little bit of cayenne in there, that definitely helps differentiate.
At Southern Press Juicer, we do, just like Chef Ari said, we do a little bit of both. Sometimes we add it, like when we do activated charcoal, we add it directly to the bottle and then pour the juice on top and then close it and then shake. I will say if you've got things added into the juice, which we often do, to make sure that whoever is bottling the juice is stirring as they bottle, because if not, it will settle down to the bottom. And that's true for really anything. I mean, the ingredients are going to separate based on weight. So you just got to make sure. I know that sounds like common sense, but when you're giving that to a 16-year-old person, they're just like bottling, talking, and then you're going to get two really spicy juices at the bottom that you're going to have returns on, and then some really mild and kind of tasteless juices that are going out for the majority of the batch. So whatever you do, you just got to make sure you're being cognizant of it as you're bottling.
Yeah. And what I recommend with that too, if like spirulina, if you're incorporating that into your juice, start with a little bowl, with the spirulina in it, and then slowly add the juice, kind of like you're making a gravy, turkey gravy, you slowly incorporate that. It avoids the clumps. If you have the juice and you add the spirulina on top, just floats, and a lot of times you mix it, it'll have clumps. So start with the spirulina in a small bowl and slowly add the juice to it.
And to what Olivia said about make sure you're stirring it, that even happens like if you just have a juice that has a lot of ginger in it, and it sits for a while, a lot of that ginger will fall to the bottom just because of gravity, and then if you're not stirring it while you're bottling, you'll get like not much ginger in the first few bottles, and the last couple will just be like an inch of ginger on the bottom. Okay, we have another question from somebody named Steve. Hi guys, any tips for juicing pineapple on the X1? Thanks. So I know there's usually debate. Do you peel it and grind it? Do you leave the peel on and grind it, or you just cut it in pieces and press it? Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah. So if I say definitely leave the peel on if you're using a cold press, because the skin, it helps press it, extract it, because it's extremely mushy. So that's actually going to help you out. It kind of depends on your operation. There's no clear-cut answer for this. If you're using like an X1 or larger, you do have that option of quartering it, removing that green crown, and placing it directly in a press. You're going to lose a tiny bit of yield on that, but you're going to save a lot of time. So it really depends on some other outside factors. For the Mini and the M1, definitely incorporate other produce with that if at all possible. If you're doing straight pineapple, it can definitely get a little bit mushy, so you can't top off the press chamber. So yeah, I mean, the options really come in when you start going with X1 and above, with pressing a hole.
Olivia, do you know off the top of your head how you do the pineapple?
I think they do it two different ways. I think it really depends on which juice in particular they're doing. I don't manhandle the X1. The back of the house does, but I do see them sometimes cutting off the top of it and throwing it in the X1. And then I also do see them sometimes cutting off the peel and putting it in the press. So it could, I don't have my chef with me or I would ask him, but it could be that, maybe he needs more yield and doesn't have as many pineapples. So he's putting it straight in the press to get a higher yield. It could be that he doesn't want that much of a pineapple flavor. It's maybe a second or third ingredient. So he's putting it in the chute instead of in the press. I've definitely seen it both ways.
For me, I've always found the best way. You cut the crown off and the bottom of it off and make sure it's real clean. And then you just cut it into like quarters and just grind it and press it like everything else. And I've done side-by-side testing on this with a chef. Give a demo at Cafe Gratitude, and they were impressed at how little difference you could tell in the taste and color by leaving the peel on. It was very, very only slight difference. Like if the pineapple's mixed with other things, you don't notice any difference. And also it gets higher yield because if you ask someone to peel a pineapple, most people are peeling too much off, and they're like cutting a lot of the pineapple out itself. So you're losing some yield that way. And then also you get to save time by not peeling it. So my go-to advice is just chop it up, grind it, press it, and be done with it.
Yeah, I've seen some people actually have like diced pineapple for their bowls and salads and stuff. And they'd actually save the skins and actually juice that. Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. Olivia, so you did an IG Live yesterday, and this is something you're going to be doing every Wednesday from the Southern Press Juicery account. And yesterday you gave an awesome demo on how to make acai bowls using your method. I think you guys have even won some awards for your acai bowls, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Got voted top 10 bowls by USA Today.
That's awesome. And one thing I found cool was you actually grind bananas in with the acai mix, right?
Yeah. So we use for the recipe I was doing yesterday, I was using our house-made almond milk that's pressed on the X1 in the back. And then it's bottled in half gallons for us. And then we don't use scoopable acai or soft acai. We get acai frozen packs. We cut those and split them. So it's, what would be one block is now 2 blocks. And so for that particular recipe, it's just better on your blender to mix first your liquid base with your acai, get that, into a more liquefied version, and then add in the bananas at the end. And that's what really gives it whatever your frozen is. For me, I was using bananas. You could use blueberries or whatever your frozen is. You could really do it the other way around, but it just takes so much more time. It's harder on your blender. You have to open it and move it around. So that's really, for us, has been proven to be the easiest way on the blender and get the best results.
Cool. So if anyone wants to watch the demo on that, you can watch it on the Goodnature account on Instagram at Goodnature Pro, or you can check out Southern Press Juicery. We've posted it on both our accounts. And you'll be doing
cool.
Yeah,
they definitely have a technique, which is
yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that you could be making acai bowls for how long and still always think about how to improve that process, where you're blending the acai and the almond milk and then adding the bananas later. It's just always kind of testing out, which was cool to see.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and you're in your business, you're pretty firmly against buying the sweetened acai. Do you consider banana, is that what's sweetening the mix for you?
Yeah, that's the sweetener in the base.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of that mix, I don't even know if companies realize that they're buying it with a ton of sugar in it.
Yeah, it's really, it's, like I said yesterday in the live, I don't want to hate on anybody's brand, but it's not, sweetened acai is not my brand. Like that's not what Southern Presbytery is about. So, it's just really, you just have to think about your brand through and through and what you fall on the sword for. And for us, we don't have any added sweeteners. Like even in our smoothies and bowls, the only thing we would use would be dates, maple syrup, agave, or honey. That's it.
Very cool. We will talk more about acai bowls in the future. I know Olivia has a lot to say on those. Cool. So we can start to wrap this up. I just want to mention that next week we have our first guest on. We have Annie Parks, who is the owner of the Balance Bee. Where's that located, Ari?
Peoria, Illinois.
In Illinois. She has an awesome background. She used to be a professional volleyball player, I think even an Olympic athlete. And she now works a lot with athletes and nutrition and does like health coaching and she's a nutritionist, and she has her juice bar, and she makes bone broths. She has a line of bone broths, and she's super knowledgeable, especially when it comes to like sports nutrition. So we're excited to have her on next week. We can chat all about sports nutrition and how maybe you can serve the athletes in your neighborhood better with your juice bar, your juice business. And just a reminder, go to goodnature.com/radio if you want to leave a voicemail with a question that we can respond to on the air, or if you'd like to inquire about actually getting some consulting from Ari and Olivia, there's a form there. We'd be happy to get on a 30-minute call with you. I guess before we go, I think it's fun to talk about if you guys are reading or watching anything cool at the moment.
Well, I just saw the Queen died while we've been on this call.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what I'll be reading for the next. That's what I'll be reading about for the next few days.
Yeah.
I've been learning a lot about Indian culture watching Indian Matchmaker on Netflix. It's like, look, I know these reality dating shows are total trash, but I find them entertaining, and it's interesting to see how the whole process works. These parents like hire this matchmaker to like find someone to marry for their son or daughter. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, if my son gives me some time from watching Coco Melon, I think I'll be able to get to. I saw there's a new chef's table that's just on pizza. So
I saw that.
Maybe
I saw
about
it pop up.
5-6 hours of pizza. So I'll probably be watching that.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody. I think this is a successful first episode, and I'll see everybody next week.
See you then.
Thanks.
Bye.